Hi all, Violet here, second generation homeschooling mom of 3. I have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a toddler. Today I wanted to share with you all of the books that we read for our Read-Alouds during this last school year. So let's get into it. A couple of quick notes before we start. The first is that if you've seen my Read-Alouds video from last school year I considered my son a sensitive reader. He was easily bothered by a lot of things. This year, that was not an issue for him. I no longer consider him a sensitive reader. And OT was a huge part of kind of getting him through some of that anxiety, which ended up being sensory related. Anyway, the point of all of that is just that some of these books are a little bit scarier and have a little bit more tension and action than things that we read last year. This year I also tried really hard to choose a wider variety of both classic and modern books that I thought would appeal to my kids. And then the last little quick note is that I'd mentioned in my family subjects video that we didn't get to a lot of our morning basket stuff because I was tired a lot of days from all the things that we were doing. We overscheduled ourselves with OT and speech therapy and all of our activities, but the silver lining to that is that we had a lot more time to listen to audiobooks because I tended to play them during all of our meals instead of doing all the other morning basket type things that I had planned. So a lot of these books we listened to partially or completely on audiobook. This first book is called Ra the Mighty Cat Detective, and my son really likes detective stories. His favorite podcast is Snoop and Sniffy, which is 2 dog detectives, so I thought he'd be really into this. And my daughter likes cats, and they both have done Ancient Egypt with History Quest. My son just did the History Hops, and it was a while ago, but they did like this book. We read the rest of the books in the series, but they didn't think Ra was as funny as I thought they would. He's kind of supposed to be a spoiled and self-indulgent character, and they were mostly annoyed by that, which I guess is good, but he's supposed to be kind of funnier than they found him to be. The next book that we read was Small Tolla by Atanuke, and we read the rest of the books in this series as well. We've read a bunch of Atanuke's series before, and we love all of them. We've actually already read Small Tolla, but I reread it this year because we hadn't read the other books in the series. They weren't published yet last time we'd read through this book. So I started at the beginning. We read through all of them. Actually, we listened to them on audiobook. The audiobook narrator is Nigerian. This takes place in Nigeria, and that's just not really something I can provide in my reading. So this is one that I really do feel like the audiobook provides another layer that is really beneficial. So this is about a little girl who lives in an apartment building in Lagos. And Atanuke has 3 series about little kids. The first one is Anna Hibiscus. Anna Hibiscus also lives in Lagos, but she's from a very wealthy family, so they live in their own family compound. And then Small Tolla is poorer. So she lives in an apartment building, and it's all about her adventures and her interactions with the neighbors. And even though we listen to it on audiobook, I still check this book out and show my kids all the illustrations. I do think that's an important part of reading books like this that have illustrations, is seeing those illustrations. And then her 3rd series that we've read is Number 1 Car Spotter, and that also takes place in Nigeria, but that's rural Nigeria. Number 1 Car Spotter is his name, and he lives in a little village. I think his house is cement or something, but he has to watch goats and walk a long way to school, and he spots cars on the highway going past and stuff like that. Anyway, we really like all of Atanuke's books. They're wonderful. They bring up a lot of really good discussion topics, too, because they're not all sunshine and happy. She kind of has a really good balance. They're all positive, but 3 stories will be kind of more happy day-to-day life stuff, and then 1 story will be about heart-wrenching poverty. The next series that we read was Toys Go Out, and this is about the adventures of this little stingray, the buffalo, the ball, the sheep, all the animals that you see on here. And so this has some illustrations throughout, but these are just cute kind of Toy Story-esque stories. There's 3 books in this series, and my kids enjoyed all of them. A lot of the things are inanimate things in this series are also characters, like the washing machine is a character, so those are fun. The next series that we read was Chicken Squad. So this is Chicken Squad, the first misadventure, and it's narrated by this retired search and rescue dog, and he meets these 4 chicks who each have their own distinct personality trait. One's a coder and does languages, one is breaking and entering, one fights, and one is kind of silly, basically. One of them is sciencey too, because I remember in one of the books, one of them was explaining all sorts of meteorology stuff. They're usually trying to solve some sort of mystery, and so they have to work together to figure out what's going on in the farmyard. So this is a really cute series. The next book we read was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This is an illustrated edition. And my kids really liked this. I wasn't sure how much of it they'd be able to follow, because it does kind of draw on some history and linguistics and stuff like that. But I was able to stop and explain, and they found it funny. They weren't too bogged down by having to listen to explanations here and there. And then we also read Through the Looking Glass, which they also liked, but not quite as much as Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So I'm really glad they liked that, because it's a fun book. We also have this Alice's Adventures in Wonderland pop-up book that we have looked through before, but we looked through it again once we were done reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, just because I think it's so cool. I don't know that I'm going to be able to fit it all on here. But the pop-ups are quite large, and they have, like, this one has the Cheshire Cat, the Mad Hatter, the Queen of Hearts. I really like this book because they're just very detailed pop-ups. I think this one's cool too. The table pops up from the book. Anyway, this author, Robert Suda, has a whole bunch of these really intricate pop-up books, and I think they're so cool. Our next book that we read was Mulan Before the Sword by Grace Lin, and we really like Grace Lin. We've read a ton of her stuff. This book in particular, the story structure ends up being a little bit odd because it's a lead-in to the live-action movie, which I didn't realize when we first started reading it, but then I Googled it because there are characters that I don't remember from being in the animated movie. And so if you've seen the live-action movie, maybe it would make more sense. We haven't. So there were just a couple of characters that I wasn't sure who they were supposed to be, but they're from the live action movie. Anyway, my kids really enjoyed this. We like Grace Lin's stories. This is just Mulan as a little kid goes on an adventure to save her sister, and it weaves in some Chinese folklore and things like that. The next book we read was Beverly Cleary's The Mouse and the Motorcycle. We read all the books in the series. This is about a mouse who befriends a boy, and the boy gives him a little toy motorcycle, and Ralph discovers that if he makes motorcycle sounds, the motorcycle will go. And so he rides his motorcycle all around, gets into trouble, gets out of trouble. It's just a cute story and he lives at the hotel that the boy comes to stay at. So, and then the other books in the series are his further adventures, involving different vehicles too. So my kids enjoyed that a lot. This next book we read, my kids loved, The Phantom Toll Booth. And this is about a boy who is complaining that he's bored, and he gets mailed this car that transports him to this, it's not really magical, but kind of like this other land. There's a word land and a math land, and he has to rescue the princess. And this one we actually did listen to mostly on audiobook because I had gotten a cold or something and lost my voice. But for this one, a lot of the jokes are in the pictures. So it's really important that you can see what's going, like this is Talk, he's a watchdog. And if you can't see the pictures, you don't get immediately, I think they eventually explain it, but you can't immediately see that he has a watch on him, and that's why he's a watchdog. So there's just a lot of jokes like that in the pictures. So I held the pictures up while the audiobook played for my kids. This is one that I'd wanted to read out loud, but it just didn't work out. And my kids didn't want to wait for me to feel better to keep listening because they were really into this. So yeah, this one was a hit. The next book we read was The Boxcar Children, and this book, specifically the first one, is my son's favorite book that we read all year. He listened to it, once we were done with the first 3 books, he listened to the first one probably a dozen times on audiobook over the course of the rest of the year. My kids just really liked the whole adventure the kids had, setting up their house in the boxcar, their little day-to-day interactions, and the just little sprinkle of mystery, who is the grandfather, and finding him at the end. So after this, we did read the second one, and my kids were much less impressed with that one. They didn't really like the mystery in that one. They thought it was kind of just okay. And they didn't really like that one has a whole archaeological dig on the island that they're staying on, and they just didn't care about that much. I don't know. The second one didn't work as well for them, but they did like it enough to want me to read the third one, and they hated the third one. It's all about going on. It's another mystery to find another long-lost relative. This time it's somebody who's like a worker for the family, so not technically a relative, but it's the same kind of deal. And they again go shopping and buy all of their stuff. And my kids at this point were like, they already have the stuff from the boxcar. They already have the stuff from the island. Why do they need to go shopping again? And that one also has some like weird food stuff that they get super excited about that my kids were kind of grossed out by. Like I think that one has the chicken in a can. They're all really excited to eat. These kids eat so much bread and milk, and they get super excited about all of it. Anyway, first one was a hit. The other 2 kind of meh. And the third one, my kids were not about it at all. Since my kids liked the survivalist stuff in Boxcar Children so much, I pulled out Abels Island, which is a book that I loved when I was a kid. I read it many, many times. And I was really hoping and thinking that they would like it as well, and they did not. I'm not really sure why, but the kind of more Robinson Crusoe vibe of this one didn't work as well for them as the Boxcar Children. And it might have been that he was alone, and so all that he was doing was the survival stuff, and there wasn't all the family interaction of the siblings that the Boxcar Children has. But this one has really cute illustrations. This mouse gets washed away and has to, and he ends up on an island, and so he spends his time at first surviving, and then after that kind of entertaining himself. So he finds a book that he reads, he does all these sculptures after he's built his house and grown his food and all of that. Anyway, I really liked this. My kids did not. We did read it all. They didn't dislike it so much that they asked to stop reading it, but they definitely didn't like it. This next book was really good. Unusual Chickens for the Exceptional Poultry Farmer, and we also read the sequel, How to Hatch an Unusual Chicken. This is about this girl, Sophie, who moves from Los Angeles, and her parents move from Los Angeles to rural California. They inherit Sophie's great uncle's farm, and she also inherits all of these chickens with superpowers. So she has to figure out how to take care of them and how to deal with their superpowers, and there's some other hijinks that happen as well. This also talks a bit about what it's like being Hispanic in a predominantly white area, because in Los Angeles, that was not the case. And then she moves to this rural area where they're one of the few, if not only, Hispanic families around. So we really enjoyed this book. It was funny. And it's told mostly in letters and little correspondence courses and things like that. It's not like a straight text. So that was fun as well. Lots of illustrations too. This next book is called The Chocolate Touch, and it's just King Midas, but instead of gold, it's chocolate. So this boy loves chocolate. He gets his wish to turn everything to chocolate granted, and then he finds out that it's not actually so great. Pretty much just a straight King Midas retelling. My kids did enjoy it. We read that after we'd listened to a ton of Greeking Out, and so my kids were interested in more kind of Greek myth-inspired stuff. Not Percy Jackson, though, interestingly. They didn't want to read that yet. Anyway, this next book was also one of our really big hits from this year, Friendle by Andrew Clements. And if you have not read this book, it's really funny. So it's this boy who has a very strict English teacher. And so he decides, they're learning about language and how language works, and they have to use a dictionary in her class and everything. So he decides to invent a new word for pen and get all of the kids to use it. And it kind of drives his teacher nuts, and it turns into this whole thing. But this was really good. And we also read the sequel called Friendle Files, which is updated now. The boy in this book is the English teacher, and they're dealing with a whole new set of problems, mostly revolving around ebooks and ebook piracy and things like that. So that was really good too. The next book that we read this year is From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, and this is about two kids who run away and live in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So my kids really liked this book too. And we looked up somebody, I'll try to find the link and put it below, but somebody on their blog has posted pictures of all of the things that are mentioned in this book, like all of the works of art at the Met, or as close as she can get, because sometimes it's not 100% clear what they're talking about. So that was really cool. So I showed my kids all of that while we were reading. And yeah, I'm just really happy they liked this book, because this is another book that I loved when I was a kid, and my mom loved this book when she was a kid too. So this next book is called Toothpaste Millionaire. This is another book that I loved when I was a kid, and my kids also loved. This is about this boy who figures out how to make his own toothpaste for a fraction of the cost of commercial toothpaste, and then he starts selling it at first to his friends and family, but then as his production grows, he starts to scale and reach more and more people. And this is all told from the point of view of his friend, this girl here. And so eventually by the end of the book, like, he's in full-on production mode with a toothpaste factory and toothpaste tubes, and kind of just the whole process of starting a business was really interesting to my kids. And then at the end, they address how he's able to do it so inexpensively because he's also not paying any of the taxes or legal fees that he's supposed to be paying. So that was nice too. There's a lot of economic stuff to talk about in this book, but it was just a really fun book. We liked this book so much that I then checked out Pushkart War for my kids, which is by the same author. And I had never read Pushkart War, but I'd heard about it a lot. And this we actually did not finish. And the reason for that is it also is really good and really funny, but it's aimed at a much older audience. This is a anti-war novel, essentially, about a war between pushcart and truck drivers in New York City. But the way that it's written is like a historical treatise kind of, and it's meant to be satire and funny, but my kids just aren't old enough to appreciate that. So they thought it was kind of boring, and so we stopped pretty quickly because it was clear to me that they were not old enough to really appreciate this book. So we'll come back to this eventually, but for now we put it to the side. The next book that we read was Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. And my kids really liked this book, but when I told my husband I was going to read this, he has only ever seen the movie, which I guess is super scary. I've never seen the movie. But so he was saying, oh, I think it's going to be too scary for the kids. But it was not. It was fine. They actually really liked it. They got really into it. But it's about, the kind of frame story is Mrs. Frisbee's son has pneumonia, and they live in a field, and so they need to move out of the field before the plow comes, but she's worried to move him because she's sick, so she goes to these special rats to get help. And so the bulk of the book is learning about the story of these rats. How do they get to be so smart and clever, and like they have electricity in the house that they're living in the cavern that they've dug for themselves, and kind of their whole what's up with them. And so, spoilers, you find out that they were lab rats, they were experimented on, they're super smart, they learn to read, they have this whole very complicated rat society, and yeah, my kids just thought that it was really interesting. And then at the end of the book, the rats have to pack up and go. And there are some sequels to this, but they were written many years later by somebody entirely different, so we didn't read them. The next book that we read was Chasing Vermeer by Blue Balliet, and this is about a Vermeer painting gets stolen, and these two kids, Petra and Calder, are trying to unravel the clues to figure out where it went, basically. But there's a lot of kind of more philosophical stuff in here that I didn't remember from, because I read this when I was a kid. And so that kind of those parts kind of went over my kids' heads, and so they were a little bit bored at times while they were reading this. So there are some fun like pictures, but there are, especially the farther along you get into it, there are clues in the pictures to help you figure things out. Calder carries pentominoes in his pocket, and so my son got really into pentominoes for a little bit. And we looked up the paintings. They have reproductions in the back of this one, but they're just in black and white. Let's see if I can find them. So we looked up color versions of these paintings, but there are more books in the series, and I'm going to wait to continue on to those. My kids did enjoy this, but I think they would have enjoyed it a lot more if we'd read it a few years from now. So we may reread it in a few years and then read the rest of the series. The last series that we read this year is this Fractured Fairy Tales series by Liesl Shirtliff, and the first one is Rump. It's a Rumple Stiltskin retelling. And this, my kids really liked all of the books in this series. They really liked the whole Fractured Fairy Tale thing. But when I was reading reviews of this, I had gotten the impression that it was going to be really funny, and I did not think it was that funny. Basically, the whole novel, Rumpelstiltskin, has kind of terrible things happening to him. Like his grandma dies, and he gets bullied by some of the other kids, and then pixies attack him, and it just was not funny. But it was a good story, and it was a really interesting take on the Rumpelstiltskin myth. So we're reading through Red right now. My kids did really like this book. That is all I have to share with you for today. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. What were some of the read-alouds that your family really enjoyed this year? I hope you found that helpful. As always, I will link everything in the description box below. I am a bookshop and Amazon affiliate, so if you click on one of those links and make a purchase, I do receive a small commission. Thank you for watching.